Caleb, and 2015 was a pretty good year. We had so many movies to get hyped over. It seemed like even if a movie that we hyped up like crazy didn't meet our expectations, it wasn't that big of a deal because there was another one around the corner. It seemed like there was just so much to get excited for. And then we also had dark horses that kind of came out of nowhere and managed to surprise us and be really good. So 2015 was a pretty solid year for action movies, I must say. And so, as a lot of people do, I'm going to be doing a top 10 best action movies of 2015. Now, of course, I want to stress I did not see every action movie last year. There were a couple that I still haven't gotten around to watching, like the last Hunger Games movie and Hateful Eight, which seems like every time I'm about to go watch Hateful Eight, something comes up and I'm not able to. But I will watch Hateful Eight soon. But even then, I still feel like my list is going to be pretty much exactly the same. Also, I want to stress that I'm focusing on action movies, just to kind of, I don't know, set myself apart from every other top 10 best movies of the year list that's out there. So there's also some movies that I really, really enjoyed that I'm just not going to talk about on this list. And at some point in this video I'll get around to talking about those. Also, it's typical to have a worst of the year list. Unfortunately, when I say that I did not see every action movie of the year, a lot of the ones I didn't see ended up being the ones that are typically on the worst lists. It just so happens. I certainly saw some of the terrible ones, don't get me wrong, but there were also a lot of the bad action movies this year that I just didn't get around to see. So I don't think I could make a very strong worst of the year list, although I might release kind of a small video in a little bit giving like maybe a bottom 5 or bottom 3 worst of the year. But for now, I want to focus on the positives because we did have a lot of good stuff for 2015. So let's get on with the list, shall we? Number 10 is Furious 7. Okay, I am a big fan of Dwayne Johnson. I swear it's purely by coincidence that, see, I never really cared all that much for the Fast and Furious movies until Fast 5. I swear it's just coincidence that it's because Dwayne Johnson showed up in Fast 5. It's just coincidence, trust me. A little coincidence. He's the best part of these movies, he really is. But Furious 7 manages to do something that all of the previous Fast and Furious movies just couldn't quite manage to be, and that is turn into just complete cartoon. Furious 7 is so insane and over the top with its action, you'd swear you're watching a cartoon. And this is especially surprising since the director of this movie had never done an action movie before. The director of this movie was James Wan, the guy that made some of the best horror movies of the past decade. This is the guy that made The Conjuring and Insidious. This is the guy who made the original Saw, okay? And his first attempt at an action movie. Pretty solid, I must say. But this movie manages to just be so over-the-top ridiculous, you just can't help but have a good time with it. Yes, it's stupid. Yes, it's dumb. Yes, it's uber male, but it's funny. Number 9, Jurassic World. Now, there's been a lot of backlash to this movie recently, I've noticed, which is weird, because when this movie came out, I remember pretty much everybody was on board with it. Like, woo, it's the best Jurassic Park sequel that's ever been made. Or, wow, it managed to capture the magic Jurassic Park. Recently, all I hear is, oh, it's nothing but CG, and it's terrible, and it's just a stupid monster movie. So, to me, it managed to capture the magic of Jurassic Park, and by that I mean not that, wow, those dinosaurs are right there, it's cool. It's more of just the idea of, this is a place I want to go to. And for Jurassic World especially, like, they introduced a theme park that was really, really cool and unique and interesting, and it was a place I wanted to go to. You know, I was totally fine staying in Jurassic World throughout this movie because it just looked like a fun place to be. Yes, it turned into a generic monster movie, but I like monster movies. This is a monster movie with dinosaurs. And Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt's in everything now. Oh man, but it's a lot of fun. I thoroughly enjoyed Jurassic World a lot. Number 8 is The Man from U.N.C.L.E. So 2015 practically could be called the year of the spy movie because we had so many spy movies this year, and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. I think is probably one of the biggest dark horses because it's The Man from U.N.C.L.E. It's a movie based on a TV show that nobody remembers. The only time you would even hear about The Man from U.N.C.L.E. recently is if you watched Mission Impossible on Netflix and it would recommend it to you. It was extremely funny, very entertaining. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Now, a lot of people said that Kingsman: The Secret Service was kind of like an old school James Bond movie but like today. And honestly, oddly enough, I felt that The Man from U.N.C.L.E. did a better job of that than even Kingsman did. When I watched The Man from U.N.C.L.E., it really does have that feel of a later Sean Connery, early Roger Moore kind of Bond movie. There's just enough of the kind of classy, witty humor of those Bond movies, and as well as a lot of kind of ridiculous but self-aware humor about it. I feel like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. is probably the best example of like what an old school James Bond movie would be like today. Spoiler alert! Kingsman's gonna show up later on this list, so don't worry. Spectre. The newest James Bond movie. Now, I'm a huge fan of James Bond, always have been since I was like 13 when I first saw him. You know, a lot of people have problems with Spectre, but honestly, I don't really see that much of a problem. Yes, I acknowledge that a lot of the criticisms that people have with the movie, it just personally, I don't really see a lot of those criticisms as anything that takes away the movie from me. To me, I see this movie as just an old school, classic James Bond movie, and honestly, I don't really see how that's a problem. As much as I love Skyfall, I mean, it's probably my favorite Bond movie, but Skyfall's kind of the weird, cool black sheep, I guess, in the sense that it's not just a good Bond movie, but it's just a very well put together film. It's just a really great film, and a lot of people think that all Bond movies have to be these cinematic masterpieces. Well, from personal experience, as a friend of mine and I went back and watched all of the James Bond movies recently, I can tell you not all of them were. Not all James Bond movies are these great cinematic masterpieces. They were all meant to be just fun action movies with a lot of class, and I don't understand what makes Spectre so bad because of that. I never heard anybody complain about the line "shaken, not stirred" until this movie came out. I mean, when Spectre came out, Casino Royale wasn't even 10 years old. And I remember people complaining about Casino Royale because it did not have any of the classic James Bond tropes like the line "shaken, not stirred," Moneypenny, the kooky gadgets from Q. All of a sudden Spectre comes out not even 10 years later and everybody complains that it brought it back. I just don't get why Spectre was really this huge disappointment to people. I certainly got it because it wasn't the great cinematic film quality that we got from Skyfall before, especially because it's the same director as Skyfall. So I think we were all expecting Skyfall again, but what we got was just a throwback film. While that is disappointing to an extent, I understand it because we have been without a traditional Bond movie in a long time. I would argue not even since probably Tomorrow Never Dies. Maybe World Is Not Enough, but that wasn't a good one. It's been a long time without a classic James Bond movie. We finally, so yeah, it's about time to bring him back. Now, I do understand a lot of people had problems that it's built up to look as though we're gonna look really deep into Bond's past. And in the end, we don't really get much more information, really. Anything really all that new, and nothing really all that big, except that he has a connection with a villain. But honestly, I'm fine with that. I don't really see why we need to delve into the character of James Bond. James Bond is not meant to be this character to analyze. It's just supposed to be this fantasy figure for men. He's like, hey, this is the guy I want to be. He is a vessel for what I want to be. The fact that we got any information at all just is fine with me. I don't really want to delve that deep into the character of James Bond. He's just not the character that really needs that. So it didn't really bother me. I really didn't understand the negative reviews, especially considering that it got a lower score than Quantum of Solace. And I can tell you, Quantum of Solace is far worse than Spectre. Neither of them are the worst Bond films, but Spectre is certainly much better than Quantum of Solace. I would say that Spectre is definitely on the higher end of Bond movies, but I'll admit, not quite as strong as Skyfall, Casino Royale, GoldenEye, Goldfinger, stuff like that. Avengers Age of Ultron. This was probably one of the biggest, big hype movies of the year, and while I'll admit that it certainly didn't really exactly meet our expectations, I really feel that the problem there is more of with us, not with the movie. Because when you just look at the movie as itself, it's actually a really good, really solid movie, and certainly stands pretty high among these Marvel movies. Unfortunately, our expectations really brought us down. We were expecting something so high that, in hindsight, there was no way it was going to meet our expectations. They were just so high, there was no possible way it was going to meet it. And when it didn't, a lot of people's reaction was that it wasn't a good movie. But that's not really the case. I thoroughly enjoyed Avengers Age of Ultron. I thought it was a great movie. It just didn't meet our expectations. So what? Okay? So what, it didn't meet our expectations. Yes, Black Widow and Bruce Banner's relationship comes completely out of nowhere and is kind of random, I'll admit, but on the other hand, Bruce Banner deserves it. I mean, look at that guy's life, man. He needs a lady. Plus, giving Hawkeye a family, oddly enough, actually made him way more interesting than he was in the first movie. I mean, in the first movie, he was just cool guy with bow. That's fine and dandy, but we have a lot of that now. Just cool superhero with bow. Except, gonna be brutally honest here, Oliver Queen and Arrow, Stephen Amell, does a better job at doing that than Hawkeye did in the first movie. So at least Age of Ultron gave Hawkeye more of a character that's actually interesting and cool, so that's something. But overall, I really enjoyed Age of Ultron. Yeah, it didn't meet my expectations, but in hindsight, it probably was never going to. If you told me when the year started that I was going to like AntMan more than Avengers Age of Ultron, I wouldn't believe you. Yet somehow, I do. Despite all of the behind-the-scenes issues going on with Ant-Man, and there was a lot of issues behind the scenes with this movie, but despite all that, it still managed to actually come out to be a great movie. I would say, apart from Guardians of the Galaxy, Ant-Man is the funniest Marvel movie. I might even go as far as to say it might be funnier than Guardians of the Galaxy. There's just so much humor to Ant-Man. I loved it. It had such a great sense of humor about it. Now, yes, there is the joke that the plot to Ant-Man is basically just the first Iron Man. But unlike Iron Man, Ant-Man actually manages to be something other than a typical superhero origin story, even though it goes beat by beat exactly like a previous Marvel origin story, in the case that it's not really about somebody fighting crime or fighting terrorists like Iron Man. It's a heist movie. In the end, this is really just a heist movie with a character who has an extraordinary way of doing the heist. In this case, having a suit that can make him shrink. It was hilarious. I loved this movie. It was such a fun time, just for the humor alone. So, definitely recommend Ant-Man. This was probably the biggest dark horse of the year, and that's Kingsman, The Secret Service. I mean, this should have been a pretty terrible movie, honestly. I mean, it's based on a source material nobody's ever heard of. It came out really, really early in the year, during the time when movies pretty much go to die. And yet, it managed to be great. Now, like I said, a lot of people thought that Kingsman was kind of like an old school James Bond movie, but to me, I didn't really get that vibe all that much. It's certainly there, don't get me wrong, but this is certainly different than Bond movie. This is more like if the Bond franchise had just decided to, forget it, we're just going hard R rating. This is one of the most hard R action movies of the year. It's extremely violent, full of all kinds of, just all of the profanities. It has it all. This movie is just so fun and just bonkers ridiculous. I mean, this is a movie that features a woman who doesn't have any legs except these gazelle-looking things that double as swords. You have Samuel L. Jackson as the villain, as a guy who's completely just an idiot and has a lisp. This should be a character that would be extremely annoying, and yet it worked. This is a movie that just came out of nowhere, had little hype around it except for those who did read the source material, and actually managed to be one of the most fun and entertaining action movies of the year. Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation. I love the Mission Impossible movies, which is weird to say because a couple months ago I would have said I like some of them, but recently I went back and rewatched the Mission Impossible movies and I realized that it's actually a really solid franchise. With the exception of two, pretty much all the Mission Impossible movies have been pretty consistently decent. Except for two. Two was terrible. But the rest of them are all pretty great movies. But to me, what makes Rogue Nation my personal favorite is the team. See, that's one of the things that sets Mission Impossible apart from a lot of other spy, heisty kind of stuff, is the team mechanic. See, even with the TV show, it wasn't a one-man show. This was not James Bond. Okay, the series is not about Ethan Hunt. At the end of the day, it should be about the team. And Mission Impossible Rogue Nation is the best at this particular aspect. It's not just Tom Cruise's show. Everybody on the team gets their chance to shine, especially Simon Pegg and Rebecca Ferguson. I finally remembered her name. And I mean, Rebecca Ferguson is incredible in this movie, and we are definitely going to see some really cool stuff with her in the near future, I can tell, because she is fantastic in this movie. And of course, the stunts are amazing. We all know about the iconic scene of Tom Cruise hanging off the side of the plane as it takes off, and yet that's not even all of the crazy stuff he does in the movie. That's the first scene of the movie. This might be my favorite of the Mission Impossible franchise, the more I think about it. And it's certainly one of the coolest action movies of the year, with a lot of fantastic stunt work. Now at this point, you know what the top two are. You know exactly what they are. In fact, as soon as I say what the number 2 spot is, you're gonna already know what the number 1 spot is, so saying what number 2 is practically a spoiler for the end of this list. So at this point, I'm gonna kind of take a break for a second and actually talk about some of the other movies I saw this year that were not action movies, so I couldn't put them on the list, and yet I just feel the need to talk about them anyways. I just want to talk about them. The first 2 that I really want to talk about are ones that I struggled with including on the list, but at the end of the day, I just didn't see them as action movies. I saw them as something else instead, and that's The Martian and Creed. Now, these are actually my 2 favorite movies of the year. The Martian especially. The Martian is my favorite movie the entire year. It's just an incredible movie, and Creed is seriously not far behind. These are probably the 2 best movies of the year, just overall in any category, in my personal opinion. But I just didn't feel that either of them were really action movies. Creed certainly has fights in it, yes, but much like the original Rocky, it's a drama first. The fights are just are certainly there, and they're extremely well shot, but there's not that many, and they aren't really the focus of the movie. The focus of the movie are the characters and the story and the drama. So to me, much like the original Rocky, I see it as a drama, not really an action movie, so I didn't include Creed. The Martian was a little bit more tricky of a choice, because I didn't really see why it couldn't count as an action movie, especially because the action movie as a genre, it kind of varies depending on who you talk to. But to me, I didn't really see it as an action movie. I saw The Martian as a dramedy, not really an action movie. Yes, there are scenes that I could, I guess, count as action. There is certainly suspense and a threat of danger and that shot of adrenaline that you expect from an action movie, but I just didn't really feel that it fit the bill of the action genre first. To me, it's a drama, comedy, then somewhere later down the list an action movie. I just didn't feel like it would fit in with this list all that much. And the other 2 that I really want to talk about is another genre of movie that I am a super big fan of, and that's animated films. I would say out of all the genres of movies, animated films are probably the ones I take the most seriously and I'm the most strict with. Because to me, if you're going to make something that is, for the most part at least, aimed at children, obviously adults go too. There's certainly something for adults, especially with Pixar movies, but when your major primary audience are children, I take that very seriously, because to me, you should be showing your kids the best stuff, not just, here, put something on and just leave them alone. You know, to me, if you're gonna, you should show your kids the best stuff. So I take animated movies very, very seriously, and I'm the most strict on them. But there were 2 fantastic animated movies that I really want to talk about. I've been gushing about these for a long time, and that's Inside Out and Peanuts. To me, Inside Out is just such a great, clever, imaginative, just fantastic movie. I mean, I have seen this movie probably 4 or 5 times now. It's one of the only movies I can think of that actually manages to make me cry. It's one of those movies, I don't know, it's just so well done that it manages to move me so much to fighting back tears. I'm a grown man, I don't cry at movies, but Inside Out's an exception, and I take that with pride. It's just a great sign of a great movie. And the other one is Peanuts. And to me, Peanuts is a fantastic movie because it obviously recaptures the old Peanuts shorts that we all grew up with. That's fine and dandy as well, but to me what really makes this something I'm proud of is the fact that it kind of sets a good example for kids. Like in this movie, these kids aren't playing with their iPads inside all day. They're going outside and interacting with each other. I mean, to me, this movie sets a great example for kids. Like, hey, you can have fun without, sitting at home all day. There is a time where you can play video games and watch movies. There's a time for that. But you also should be going outside, interacting with other people, developing social skills. That's important stuff. And to me, Peanuts is a great way to show that, hey, you can have a ton of fun doing that. There are certainly other movies that I've seen this year that were pretty good that I could talk about, but this would be a long list, so I'm just going to go ahead and talk about the top 2 action movies of the year. Now, like I said, if I bring up number 2, you're going to know what number 1 is, so I was trying to find a way of still kind of keeping the surprise, so instead I'm just going to go out and I'm just going to talk about both of them pretty much at the same time, just in chronological order, and then rank them later. So the 2, obviously, that are left that we all know about, Mad Max Fury Road and Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Mad Max Fury Road, at the beginning of the year, was kind of a dark horse in a way. It was a reboot of a franchise that had long since been dead, and just kind of seemed like it was going to be that movie that was going to be kind of like just the dumb fun movie of the year, but not much else. But as things started going and we started seeing more teasers and more trailers and things, we started to realize that this might actually be bigger than just the dumb fun movie of the year. And when it came out, it was like just a straight adrenaline shot. This movie from beginning to end is just nothing but heart-pounding action and stunts. It's incredible. I so want this movie to be one of those big, great milestone action movies like Die Hard or Terminator. You know, those movies that just become these iconically great milestones in the action franchise genre. And I hope that action movies in the future follow suit, kind of follow along the Mad Max Fury Road style. There's a lot of great practical effects and stunt work that's not all CG. There's no shaky cam. Finally, Mad Max Fury Road shows us you can make an incredible high-octane, fast-paced, chaotic movie without shaky cam. Thank you, Mad Max Fury Road. And then, of course, the other movie is this one that's still fresh in our memories at this point, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, a movie that shouldn't even exist. I mean, Lucas was never going to make another Star Wars movie. I mean, this movie was never going to exist, and not only does it exist, which blows my mind, the fact that it's so good. I mean, this is a Star Wars movie that does everything I wanted it to do. And that alone is incredible, because what I wanted it to do was something I didn't even think was possible. It manages to mix digital and practical effects so perfectly, probably better than any movie I've seen since the Lord of the Rings movies, honestly. There's just so much great animatronics and costumes mixed with great CG effects. And story-wise, it does everything I wanted it to. It has a lot of the old cast and the old stuff to kind of make it seem familiar, but that's all done to kind of pass the torch on to the new guys. And I love the new characters. I'm extremely excited to see the adventures of Rey, Finn, and Poe. I want to see more of Poe, though. There needed to be more Poe in this movie. But other than that, I don't really have a lot of complaints about Force Awakens. And so now it comes down to which one I like more. Now look, even though I haven't been making videos that long, this is something I always like to do. I always like ranking movies of the year. I always like to tell people what my favorite movie of the year is, or what I thought the best movie of the year was. And for the most part, there always seems to be that one that is pretty much the obvious. I'll tell you this, though. With these two movies, it was extremely difficult for me to choose between these two. I mean, so much so that I'm still juggling with it. Like, when I finally give the ranking, it's going to be pretty candid. Okay, I still don't know what I'm going to rank them. Okay, they're just that good. I love these movies so much, and I want these movies to be trendsetters as well. So to me, what I think is going to win out is staying power, and both of these movies have great staying power. I've been seeing memes of both of these movies like crazy throughout this entire year, but in the end, I'm going to give the number 1 spot to Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. To me, this was the best action movie of the year. It had incredible action, great acting, a good story that I want to see more of. And again, that's not to take anything away from Mad Max Fury Road at number 2. Okay, nothing to take away from that movie. It is... these are the closest... it's so hard for me to choose between these two. It's insane. And again, that's also not to take away from the movies on the rest of this list either. I would say Mission Impossible Rogue Nation is really not that far behind Mad Max Fury Road. So overall, I'd say 2015 was a great year, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what 2016 can bring us.